What happens when Korea's deadliest gangster is forced to get married? She's got a body count higher than her dating history. But when her dying sister begs for one final wish, a wedding, this blade-swinging queen trades gang wars for blind dates, stilettos, and awkward honeymoon nights. Think it's a love story? Think again. This is blood, betrayal, and a woman who fights for family with knives in her heels. Welcome to My Wife is a Gangster, where romance gets violent. Subscribe now, because this ain't your average rom-com, unless your love language is blunt force trauma. The story begins with a woman named Cha Eun-jin. She's no ordinary woman, tough, fearless, and the second in command of the notorious Scissor Gang. Leading a crew of hardened men who revere her as both boss and warrior, Eun-jin commands absolute respect. No one dares cross her, and those who do rarely get away unharmed. But beneath her brutal exterior lies a deep emotional wound. As a child, Eun-jin was separated from her younger sister. While her sister was adopted into a loving home, Eun-jin was left to survive in a ruthless world. That loss haunted her for years. She rose through the criminal underworld, not for wealth or status, but to fill the void left by her missing sister. One day, two gang members, Bada and his friend Bonsai, arrive at Scissor Gang HQ. Bonsai hopes to join, and both men bow respectfully, seeking Eun-jin's approval. Just then, one of her men brings urgent news. They've found the person she's searched for over 15 years, now in a hospital. Eun-jin rushes to the scene, only to discover her long-lost sister gravely ill. Their reunion is heartbreaking. Her sister is dying of terminal cancer. Desperate, Eun-jin threatens the doctors, demanding surgery, but they explain it's too late. Nothing can be done. For the first time, the unbreakable Eun-jin is speechless. Her sister, pale and fading, smiles through the pain. The sight devastates Eun-jin, especially now that they've finally found each other. During their emotional talk, her sister shares one final wish. She wants Eun-jin to get married. It seems absurd for someone who's lived as a gangster, but Eun-jin swears to make it happen. Not for herself, but to honor her sister's dying request. Back at HQ, she announces her decision to marry. Her subordinates are stunned. None imagined their fierce leader settling down. With no groom in sight, Eun-jin asks if any of them will marry her. But no one dares step forward. Their respect and fear make it unthinkable. Still, loyal to the end, Bada and the others take action. They visit a matchmaking agency and start arranging blind dates. To boost her chances, they even hire a stylist named Sherry to help give Eun-jin a more feminine appearance. At the headquarters, Sherry begins applying makeup to Eun-jin's face, aiming to soften her appearance. She also coaches her on how to attract men, offering tips on posture, speech, and charm. After the makeover, Eun-jin goes on a blind date arranged by Bada. Wearing a striking red dress, she arrives at the restaurant looking stunning. The groom and his parents are initially impressed, but as soon as Eun-jin walks, talks, and sits, it's obvious she's far from traditionally feminine. When asked about her background, she gets nervous and awkwardly tries to use Sherry's flirtation tips. It backfires completely, and the groom's family immediately cancels the proposal. Furious and humiliated, Eun-jin lashes out at her subordinates. Later that night, after the failed date, she pulls over by the roadside for a smoke. Two thugs approach and begin to harass her. In response, she chases them in her car, slamming into theirs with cold precision. They all get out, and Eun-jin grabs a shovel, unleashing her fury. She kicks them hard in the chest, sending them fleeing in panic. But she's not done. She turns her rage on their car, smashing it apart in a storm of violence. This provokes the attackers to return and attempt to strike back. During the scuffle, a man named Kang Soo-il steps in to protect Eun-jin but ends up getting hit in the head by a brick she throws, sustaining a minor injury. He's rushed to the hospital, and Bada offers him money as compensation, but Soo-il refuses, saying he only wanted to help. Intrigued by his sincerity, Eun-jin and her crew start to take notice of him. After some research, Bada finds out Soo-il is a single civil servant with a long trail of failed relationships. Sensing potential, Bada believes Soo-il could be a perfect candidate for another blind date with Eun-jin. To make the setup believable, the gang convinces a couple who run a food stall to pose as Eunjin's parents. The meeting is arranged at a restaurant where Soo-il and his family meet Eunjin and her fake parents. This time, the date unfolds more smoothly. When marriage is brought up, Soo-il's family hesitates, suggesting the couple take time to get to know each other. They politely step away, leaving the two alone. Eunjin then bluntly asks Soo-il if he wants to marry her. Instead of being startled, Soo-il calmly walks off to think. While Eunjin heads to the restroom, she's ambushed by members of the rival White Sharks gang, disguised as women. With precise martial arts, she takes them down and pursues them, only to find Soo-il waiting outside, holding flowers, seemingly about to propose. Behind him, Eunjin's subordinates watch in stunned silence, misreading the moment as a grand romantic gesture. The next morning, news of Eunjin's wedding reaches the White Sharks, longtime enemies of the Scissor Gang. Their leader plots to sabotage the ceremony. They fill buckets with yellow paint and prepare to crash the event. On the wedding day, Soo-il and the guests are joyful, but Eunjin remains emotionless. She just wants to get it over with. Midway through the event, Bada gets word that the White Sharks are en route to disrupt the ceremony. He quickly dispatches men to intercept them, but the rival gang breaks through and reaches the upper floor, leading to a violent brawl. Annoyed, Eunjin tries to ignore the chaos. Ironically, the guests, unaware of the real conflict, assume it's part of the entertainment. The ceremony continues in bizarre fashion. The guests are not only undisturbed by the violence, but actually delighted, applauding as one gangster nearly falls and dangles from a railing. After the ceremony, Soo-il, now officially married to Eunjin, is visibly overjoyed. Eunjin, however, remains distant and indifferent. They check into a hotel for their honeymoon. Soo-il tries to get intimate, but Eunjin avoids him by locking herself in the bathroom, pretending to be preoccupied, going as far as scrubbing the bathtub to stall. Eventually, Soo-il grows tired of waiting and falls asleep. In the middle of the night, he wakes up to find Eunjin sleeping on the sofa. Gently, he carries her to bed, but when he attempts to remove her socks, Eunjin reflexively kicks him in her sleep, sending him crashing to the floor. The next day, the big boss of the Scissor Gang returns from an overseas vacation and unexpectedly drops by the gang's headquarters. Noticing Eunjin's absence, he inquires about her whereabouts. Bada tries to conceal the fact that Eunjin recently got married, but Bansei accidentally blurts out that she's on her honeymoon. Furious that Eunjin didn't inform him, the big boss is visibly offended. That evening, an exhausted Eunjin returns home and immediately falls asleep. Soo-il once again tries to approach her affectionately, but she wakes abruptly and sternly warns him not to touch her without permission. Alarmed, Soo-il quickly backs off and respects her boundary. As nights go by, he starts having trouble sleeping beside her due to her loud snoring and sleep-talking. A few days later, Soo-il invites his colleagues over for a dinner party to celebrate the marriage. He's surprised to find that Eunjin has prepared an extravagant buffet with professional chefs. Despite the effort, her cold and unfriendly behavior stuns the guests, especially when she shows no manners, even toward a colleague's child. Frustrated and embarrassed, Soo-il finally scolds Eunjin for her behavior and the growing disconnect in their relationship. Meanwhile, Bada and Bansei are standing on a roadside when they're approached by 4 thugs who begin mocking them. Bansei warns them to leave, but they persist. Trying to avoid a fight, Bada starts singing to diffuse the tension, but the thugs continue with their taunts. Eventually, Bada loses patience and punches one of them, sending the others fleeing in panic. Back at home, Soo-il hasn't given up hope of forming a deeper bond. One night, when Eunjin returns drunk, he sees a chance to connect with her. But even in her intoxicated state, she firmly warns him again not to touch her. Soo-il ignores the warning, and in frustration, Eunjin kicks him off the bed. Eunjin visits her sister, whose condition continues to worsen. Sometime later, her sister is discharged from the hospital after receiving long-term treatment. Eunjin brings her to her new home and introduces her to Soo-il. Seeing that her older sister now had a husband brings comfort to the ailing woman. That night, Eunjin chooses to sleep beside her sister, who makes another heartfelt request. She wants Eunjin to get pregnant and start a family. The next morning, Eunjin instructs her subordinates to call Sherry for advice on how to conceive. When Sherry arrives, she enthusiastically offers a variety of tips. most of which leave Eunjin confused and overwhelmed. Still determined, Eunjin decides to follow the guidance at home. However, her awkward approach baffles Soo-il, leading to frustration on her part. Losing patience, Eunjin abandons the scripted advice and takes matters into her own hands, initiating intimacy herself. From that point on, Eunjin becomes increasingly assertive in her attempts to conceive, often surprising Soo-il with sudden advances, even in unexpected places like elevators. Though caught off guard, Soo-il finds himself unable to resist and complies with her every request. Meanwhile, the Scissor Gang completes construction on a new building and holds a celebratory dinner at a restaurant. The event is disrupted when a member of the rival White Sharks gang shows up to cause trouble. Although he's asked to leave, he remains defiantly in place, escalating the tension. Frustrated by his arrogance, Eunjin loses her patience and stabs him in the head with a chopstick. The incident infuriates Sang-ho, the leader of the White Sharks, who demands a meeting with the Scissor Gang's big boss. During the tense encounter, both sides agree to resolve their ongoing feud through a one-on-one duel between Eunjin and Nanman, one of the White Sharks' top Japanese fighters. On the day of the duel, Eunjin arrives at the designated field, weapons in hand and ready for combat. As the fight begins, Nanman lands the first blow, slicing Eunjin's cheek with his knife. He follows up with a powerful kick, knocking one of her knives out of reach. Both fighters display remarkable martial arts skills, engaging in a fierce and fast-paced battle. Eunjin quickly regains control, gradually gaining the upper hand and cornering Nanman. However, instead of delivering a fatal strike, she spares his life, choosing only to injure his leg and end the fight. After the duel, Eunjin returns home to tend to her wounds. Shortly after, Soo-il comes home and rushes to her side, helping her patch herself up. He gently informs her that her sister's condition has worsened and she's been readmitted to the hospital. Deeply affected, Eunjin later purchases a pregnancy test. To her surprise and joy, the result comes back positive. She is pregnant. Overwhelmed with emotion, Eunjin hurries to the hospital to share the news with her sister, who is still recovering. Her sister is overjoyed and lovingly reminds her to stay away from violence, for the sake of her health and the baby. She encourages Eunjin to tell Soo-il the good news as soon as possible. That evening, while still at the office, Soo-il receives a brief phone call from Eunjin. She simply asks him to come home early. Overjoyed, Soo-il stops to buy a bouquet of flowers, eager to celebrate what he believes is happy news. But upon arriving home, he is stunned to see a large dragon tattoo on Eunjin's back, undeniable proof of her connection to the criminal world. It's then that Eunjin finally confesses the truth. She is the second in command of the notorious Scissor Gang. She also reveals that their marriage was not born of love, but a promise, her way of fulfilling her sister's dying wish. Though heartbroken, Soo-il forgives her, but gently asks her to leave her gang life behind. Eunjin refuses. Her role in the gang, she explains, has become an inseparable part of who she is. Shortly after, Eunjin receives an urgent call from the hospital. Her sister's condition has taken a turn for the worse. She rushes to be by her side, but arrives only moments before her sister takes her final breath. The loss shatters Eunjin, who had only just begun to rebuild the bond with her sister after years of painful separation. Meanwhile, Bada, who had been secretly dating Sherry, prepares to propose to her. Sherry, thrilled by the surprise, quickly grabs her bag from her locker at the bar where she works. Outside, the same thugs Bada had once fought return seeking revenge. They ambush him and stab him in the stomach before fleeing the scene. Moments later, Sherry steps outside and is horrified to find Bada lying on the ground, bleeding heavily. In the pouring rain, Bada dies in Sherry's arms. Grief-stricken, Sherry immediately calls Bonsai to inform him of Bada's death, assuming it to be part of the White Sharks' plot. Enraged by the loss, Bonsai rallies the Scissor Gang and leads an attack on the White Sharks' hideout to avenge their fallen comrade. But the gang is outnumbered and quickly overpowered by the rival members. At the same time, Eunjin's home life seems to be settling. She is in the kitchen, preparing a meal for Soo-il when news of Bada's death reaches her. The shock is overwhelming. Heartbroken and filled with rage, she decides to take matters into her own hands. Despite being pregnant, Eunjin arms herself and storms the White Sharks' headquarters alone. She fights with unrelenting fury, using her knives to deflect wooden bats and launching powerful kicks against her enemies. Though outnumbered, she battles fiercely, taking down opponent after opponent. Eventually, she makes her way to higher ground in the building, but is overwhelmed and falls from a considerable height, landing hard and lying crippled on the floor. Just then, Nanmon appears, seeking revenge for his earlier defeat. Unjin pleads with them not to strike her stomach, begging for the life of her unborn child, but Nanman and the others show no mercy. They continue to beat her savagely, ignoring her cries. Just as Nanman prepares to deliver the final blow, the big boss of the Scissor Gang arrives, holding an envelope containing documents of critical importance to the White Shark's leader. In a tense exchange, he trades the documents for the lives of Unjin and her remaining subordinates. Severely injured, Unjin is rushed to the hospital in critical condition. Suil arrives at the hospital and is devastated to see his wife bruised and bloodied. A nurse solemnly informs him that Unjin has lost a significant amount of blood and has suffered a miscarriage. Only then does Suil learn that she had been pregnant. Overcome with grief and anger, he quietly resolves to seek revenge. That night, Suil disguises himself as a water delivery man and infiltrates a karaoke bar where the White Shark's leader, Sangyo, and his men are drinking and celebrating. Once inside, he douses the gangsters in gasoline. Just as he's about to ignite them, one of the men attacks him, foiling his plan. Believing themselves victorious, Sangyo casually lights a cigarette. One of his subordinates, unaware of the gasoline, strikes a lighter, setting the entire room ablaze in a fiery explosion. Amid the chaos, Suil escapes unharmed. In the final scene, Suil is no longer the timid civil servant he once was. Now transformed, he stands as a full-fledged gang member beside Unjin, prepared to face whatever enemies come their way. The film closes on a darkly comedic note. Joining a gang to fulfill a wedding vow might just help you find love, but don't forget to bring a fire extinguisher to the wedding. Because nothing says romance like beating up thugs with a shovel. Subscribe now before Unjin shows up at your doorstep with a shovel and a wedding dress. Trust us, her idea of romance involves blunt objects and flying bricks. And comment below, what movie should we recap next before she gets bored and starts another gang war?